What's up, everyone? Steven here with Neural DSP for another weekly Q&A where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Give me your questions. What do you want to talk? So you want to talk some mixing? You want to talk some plugins? You want to talk business, life, the universe, everything? Let me know. Sam Delano, what's up, my dude? How's it going? Lear, my bro, how's it going, man? Let's see. We're just going to hang for a little bit and wait for everybody to kind of fill in before we start getting into questions today. But let's see. Oh, okay. So Modern Vintage asks, "Hey Steve, really enjoyed the last Q&A. Any chance of hinting future amp releases or the most requested ones? Thanks." Unfortunately, I mean, I can't hint at anything until I get any sort of go ahead from the bosses. And that's, believe me, I'm really excited for the ones that are coming out because they're some of my favorites. And I'm super stoked on them. But we'll just kind of have to wait and to see what they want to do. Carol, what's up, dude? How you doing? How's the mixing going on? David Jimenez, what's up? Oh, it's all good, Lear. Lear says not here for long, but I'm glad you popped in, man. I am doing fantastic. Things are going super well. I'm stoked for today's Q&A, and I just did an interview with Dave Otero. He's the producer and engineer who works with like cattle decapitation. So I talked to him yesterday, so that's going to go up on the channel pretty quick. So I'm really excited to put that interview out. Modern Vintage asks, any idea when they're coming out? I think we have one coming out within the next 2 months. I would have to double check that, but don't hold me to it. Yeah, so that's coming along pretty well. All right, so let's see. Does anybody have any particular questions before I get into anything in particular? Kiki Rika Man, hey, what's up, dude? I recognize your name. Let's see. Okay, so Modern Vintage asks, can you speak on getting used to mixed plugin sound from monitors versus cab sound? Started preferring your plugins and don't see a place for amps since your plugins can cover most tones. As far as, I mean, like, are you talking about getting used to just hearing one particular sound over another? Because I think one of the reasons why probably you prefer one of the reasons I prefer the Neural DSP plugins, as far as like the cab simulations are concerned, like ML Sounds does a great job of emulating, of getting like the cab impulses. They just do a really great job of getting the right mic placements and everything. So you get like this really great mixed tone, like mixed ready tone, like off the bat, which I kind of like because I barely have to do anything. I think so looking through so this is the session that I did the four metal styles. Let me pull this up on my thing here. So this was the session that I did 4 metal styles, and I have my 4 different types of guitars, and I did try to make different guitar tones for each section too. I use like different guitars. I used to. I think that was like drop E or something like that. But as far as like being mix ready, I didn't really do anything for these except for maybe use a slight compressor on this third section here. I think I did. Let's see, guitar dual. I used a couple, like some little things here or there. This is probably where I did the most shaping, but like these are relatively small, just kind of some dips, some of like the resonant frequencies at the top, a little bit of the mid range was kind of bothering me, but like mostly just trying to get it to sit in the mix right. But I tend to prefer these more. I mean, again, I prefer them more so for my workflow. I think that there's always going to be a need for having like some physical amps, but to me, it's not quite as necessary, especially for the stuff that I'm doing. And even then, like the neural products are good enough that I'd be confident to throw them on my album and then just call it good. Let's see. Carol asks, where can we find your music? My music. So I have a lot of material backlogged right now. I have like a full album that I'm going to go back through and do some rewriting on. I actually did that in collaboration with a guy in Sacramento that he's going to be coming down to LA to work with me, and we're going to start working on getting that released pretty quick. I don't know what name I'm going to put it out under though, but you could be sure I will, I'll put it up in the Neural DSP chat and a group and on Facebook and stuff like that. So you'll definitely know when I know. So, David Jimenez asks, is the standalone version of the plugins getting any way to change patches on a live situation? Oh, okay. So David, we are going to be adding some MIDI controls to the standalone versions. So they are going to be getting some MIDI MIDI controls, so that way you can play them live. You'll just need a MIDI controller, and then you'll assign the particular controls to each MIDI controller. Yeah, there you go. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Modern Vintage. Really enjoy the consistency of sound anywhere in the room, seated, standing, etc. With an amp cab, you need to be in the sweet spot or adjust settings often for correction. That's pretty. You're pretty spot on, dude. Amps and cabs and all that. Like, there's definitely like, I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Neural DSP stuff is that it's so consistent. I can just pull up a plugin and just know exactly what it sounds like. Whereas if I threw my Mesa Boogie on a channel, if I let it run for too long, if it's a hot day, if it's a cold day, all of those things factor into, the details of my sound, which kind of frustrates me because it's like I don't like having to go back and go like, oh dang it, I must have left it on for too long or whatever, So I generally like just the consistency of having the Neural DSP plugins. Let's see. Modern Vintage asks, what amp is that? I'm not sure. I don't know if you're talking about the one that I was using on the tracks, but I can run through the tracks real quick. So very quickly, in this particular session, I used the Fortin NTS for the Behemoth section. I used the NTS again on the Lamb of God. The Archetype Pliny on the periphery kind of section. And then, again, the Archetype Pliny on the Tesseract. That's the word I was looking for, Tesseract. Let's see. Okay, Lear asks, I was playing around with the gate and the Zool pedal for the Nameless plugin. Am I better off using just one or a blend of both, gate for tighter sound and then Zool for bigger sounding sections? Hope that makes sense. Yes, that does make sense. So each gate is its own algorithm. So like they have their own threshold, their own like attack and release and stuff like that. And I would do some experimenting and kind of use a mixture of both. Like, I mean, to be very honest, like for all of my stuff, I've kind of just left that stuff at default. I've never really had to do a whole lot of gating. Zak Manzano, what's up, dude? Aloha. Let's see. Carol asks, any low high pass filters on guitars, especially high pass? Yes, I do use high pass filters. So this is the very last EQ in the line before going off into my my 2-bus, and I have the high pass set to 65 hertz. I could go as low as 50, but I felt like I wanted to make sure that at least the bass in this particular session, I wanted to make sure that it was as clear as possible, because I wanted the bass to really shine in this particular one. But like 40 to 60 generally is like that kind of sweet spot, just to clean everything up. So that's that. Glenn Pelton says MIDI woot. I agree. Yes. Sure, absolutely. So Modern Vintage asks, can you show the settings for the periphery and lamb? Yeah. Okay. For a screenshot. Yes, I can absolutely do that. I'll just go ahead and run through these real quick. So this is the periphery. Let's see. You want the Lamb of God. Okay. So the Lamb of God. Hex drive is on. I love the hex drive. It's one of my favorite pedals. I like the grind, but the hex drive has like a warmth that I really, really, really dig. Here's the head. Middle's kind of boosted up a bit. I like doing that. The mid boosted super high is really, really cool on the NTS. And then the impulse responses, I generally don't leave the 57 too often, but I did use the 906 in this particular instance. It's going on to the periphery. Let's see. Compressor on, overdrive is on. And I just boosted the tone and left the drive at 12 o'clock. The head gain set at 12 o'clock. Treble's high. Let's see. Let's look. Okay, I didn't do anything with the EQ. I went to the condenser 184 for this particular one, and then again at 57, and I left the delay and reverb off. So that's that. And while I'm at it, I might as well go through the other ones. So the Tesseract one, I actually use the Crunch amp, which I generally don't do too often. Compressor off, overdrive on with the drive up a little bit higher. EQ section I left alone. The settings for the head, I used the Dynamic 906 for this one and the 57, and then left the reverb and delay off. So that's, and then I'll just run through the Behemoth one real fast. Hex drive on, it's my fave. This one, the bass was up pretty high. I actually wanted to saturate because the just like the Fortin Nameless, the volume pot for the channels actually goes before the tone stack, the bass, middle, and treble. So you actually can push the volume into the tone stack to get more saturation out of your tone, which is pretty cool. It's one of my favorite aspects of this. So you have to back the output off a lot to make this happen, but it's well worth it when you kind of mess around with it. So okie dokie. Quattro Padre says, sounds great, man. So fun to see you guys do this Q&A. No, I have so much fun with this. I was actually a little nervous the first time I jumped into one of these, but I've had a lot of fun because you guys are awesome and are asking me some really great questions, and I really, really enjoy being able to help you guys, kind of figure stuff out that, like it's you can fall down the rabbit hole pretty fast on like YouTube and tutorials and stuff like that. So it helps me to be able to help you kind of directly and answer those questions one for one, rather than having you guys dig through a whole bunch of random stuff. So yeah, Michael D 8393, what is up? How you doing, man? Zak Manzano asks, I can't remember if you covered it, but do you just do dual tracking, or do you have any general EQ habits? So EQ habits, let's go over EQ first. There are some general tips I can give you on like EQing guitars and stuff. Okay, so let me go over guitars, and then I actually thought about going over because Wyatt Sharp from the Neural DSP Facebook group asked me to go over my drums, so I can do that. I can go over EQ with the drums as well, but I'll quickly tell you about the guitars. So the guitars, generally, what I kind of do with the guitars is I try to do the guitars without any EQ on at first, so that way I get the bass tone right, or the starting tone correct. And then I start working on problems that my ear's having. So like if you listen to the guitars, what's a good one? Okay, so let me go to periphery. So let's listen to these guitars first. Okay, so like that's the Fortin NTS. So let's listen to what I did on this first bus. So my first instinct was to start working on like the problematic areas, some of like the more resonant frequencies. So like I took a little bit, like I took a dip at 3300 and 5867. So I'll bypass this so you can hear what this is doing to my guitars. So I don't know if you can hear those whistles. Like kind of just depends on your listening environment. But let's actually do this real quick. So these are the frequencies, and I'm not going to boost them up too high, but just so you can hear what I'm listening for are these little whistly kind of frequencies in the highs that just kind of ruin just everything. So that's my starting point. Is I'm looking for those frequencies that are starting to kind of bother my ear just with like the basic tone. And then I move on. So let's go ahead and listen to what I did in this particular one. So you can see I did a lot more moves in this particular instance of Pro Q3. So let's listen to the guitars with and without this EQ. So with this particular instance, let's say let's actually start with a brand new one, and I'll kind of go through my yeah. Zach says, yeah, I try to weed out those hissing noises. Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's try and dial this in real quick with and see if I can't get some similar results. So upon first kind of listen, like I can still hear some of those whistly frequencies. So I'm going to take a very thin cue and start sweeping through and finding those areas that sort of pop out to me. So that was not so bad. There was only one particular one that was really bothering me. So what I'll do is I'll pull it up, I'll search around, I'll dip it out, and then what I'll do is I'll turn it off to compare and contrast and see if that was actually something that really bothered my ear or something that I just picked out in the moment. And then from there, I start working on, like, I know that there's a couple of problem areas just for mixing's sake. Like the 350 hertz is usually a problematic area because you want that to be sort of tight. And for, Carol asked me earlier, like, I'll bring a high pass up to about 50 to start. And all I'm trying to do right now is just kind of tighten up the guitars so that way when I pull them into the mix, okay, so that's generally what I would do, and this I could be very happy with right now, and so like I said, I'm kind of just trying to tighten up the low end so that way the bass can really pop out. So what this particular move I did is the Pro Key 3 has what's called a dynamic EQ function, where once the signal reaches a certain volume, the EQ starts to duck down so that way it doesn't reach a specific level. So, and then you saw me move this 500 or this band from 350 or 400 or whatever I had it before up to about 550 because that's in the mix. That's what kind of started to bother my ear and kind of clash with some other elements. So hopefully that kind of helps. Let me sort of go back up here. Okay, and then just to cover your second part of the question, dual tracking generally always. I do some quad tracking as well, but usually it's for chordal parts or choruses. And I've done a lot of quad tracking in the past, and it's just such a pain. And I'm typically a kind of a lazy sort of person when it comes to that, where if the quad tracking all of the tracks gets maybe like 3 to 5% better a song, then it's not really worth it because I'm looking to make as much as I can with as few moves as possible. And generally that's kind of the reason, like it kind of falls in line with what I'm doing with like neural DSP is that like what return on investment am I going to get from doing any of these techniques, as far as like dual tracking, quad tracking, etc. Like what's going to get me the best bang for the buck and what's going to get me, to the deadline on time. And that's generally what I do. So like there are certain times where I'll put in the quad tracking and more often than not, if I do quad track, I'm doing different layers of different voicings as well. So like they're kind of filling space more. So anyway, on to the next question. What's your personal Quattro Padre asks, what's your personal preference? Nameless, NTS, or archetype? Okay, so my personal preference for my playing style right now is rhythm guitar. Generally going to go with like the NTS if that's going to be like metal, because I play a lot of like I like to play like Decapitated, some Meshuggah, some kind of Pantera-esque stuff. Archetype definitely for leads because that thing just screams. But yeah, so and I love the Nameless and I'll use that too. But like for my personal style, I like the NTS and Archetype. Pliny. Let's see. Interesting. Okay. Joseph Wright asks, hello from Florida. Hey, how's it going? I have both Pliny and NTS Suite, and I record simultaneously with that or Superior Drummer 3, Metal Foundry. Can you please go through tips and tricks to keep Pro Tools 12 from crashing while I'm recording, like resource management advice from past experiences? Much appreciated. Yeah. So I mean, like, I think it definitely it depends on the rig that you're running. If you don't have a rig that's powerful enough, then you're gonna have some issues. Like I started off on a Samsung with an i3 processor, and that thing barely ran, and I was doing like Cubase 5, like some cracked version of it or whatever. But like right now, I'm running Pro Tools 12 on a PC. It's got an i9 processor with an RTX 2080, and I have like a gigabyte of SSD hard drive, a gigabyte of SSD for my main drive, and then 3 terabyte HDD for my secondary drive. So like my rig is kind of a beast. But I will say that like those things that you could do is always like Pro Tools allows you to freeze tracks, which is really helpful because that doesn't bog down your CPU. So like if you're and also pay attention to the buffer size, because if you're trying to mix on a really small buffer size, you're going to have a bad time, because the smaller buffer size, I would say, is more for recording, so you get that low latency. And then when you're mixing, bump it up as high as it can go. So like my buffer is usually at like 1024 when I'm mixing, and then I bring it down to like 128 or 256 if I'm recording. So that way I don't have to worry about latency. So like buffer size is going to be a big thing. Freezing tracks that you don't necessarily have to have active at the moment, that's going to be really, really important. Yeah, and definitely keep in mind just the rig that you're running, you know, and keep your expectations. Like if it's like an inexpensive rig, just keep your expectations, you know, within you know, relative reality. Yeah. Cool. So Enrico Rotolo, oh, what's up, dude? Does the sound of the nameless change if I buy a full Reaper license instead of using the evaluation? I can't speak to that, Enrico. I'll have to evaluate that for a little bit. Zak Manzano asks, if I may say to everyone, since I bought the Parallax, I don't stress about the low end of my mix nor my guitars. Get it if you didn't yet. I 100% agree. Like I used to have to split my my bass into like 2 to 3 tracks, do some really aggressive EQing, and then compression, and then distorting, and it was such a pain. Whereas I can just have one instance of Parallax, dial in where my low compressed crossover is, and then just deal in that sweet grid on the top end, and it's just done. Let's see. Vic20, is it possible to have a trial reset? I never got a chance to demo. My bad. You know, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so, but I think that you might check in with support at Neural DSP. You know, I'm not 100% sure, like I said. Let's see. Modern Vintage. Can you please open the nameless amp and check the Ola presets? The second and fourth or so remain the same setting wise. The file names are different. I'm on the latest release. Thanks. Sure. Yeah. Why not? Let's go ahead and Control G, solo this one. Yep. Do. Oops. Okay, you said the second to fourth or so remain the same setting wise. Okay. They all seem pretty different to me, aside from, and honestly, I don't remember if I changed this one or like these two seem to be the same. Oh, they are different. You have the little pull, the little tab here differently. So yeah, they're all different for me. If you're having issues, hit up support at Neural DSP and they can definitely help you with that. But yeah, okay, great. Okay, so Nicholas Bustos says, "Wow, it's so refreshing to hear you're using PC over Mac at last." Okay, so I've been having issues with my PC recently, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been contemplating moving over to the dark side and go with a Mac because it just seems like such um, a solution to my not having to think hard. Because I don't like having to worry about like my stream crashing in the middle of in the middle of the stream. It's like we're 35 minutes in, and it would be really bummer if my Pro Tools suddenly stopped, or like because I had issues last week that were beyond my my controls, which were really frustrating. So it's basically I'm going to go with the tool that's going to get me the best results as far as Mac or PC. Like I grew up on PC. And I love it, and it's what I'm used to, but at the same time, like I'm not so married to it that I'm gonna let it affect my output and my outcome. So yeah, so there we go. Oh, nameless. Sorry, I misread that. Where's my nameless? So far, they all sound different to me. So maybe you might want to talk with support and see if you can't get downloaded the correct presets. Let's see. Carol says, "Don't bother with presets. Find your own way." I partly agree with you. Like presets are one of those things that it's like you can get it wrong pretty quick, because a preset is a good place to start, but never stick to them 100% if you have to. Like I think that they are like I said, it's a good place to start. I don't knock presets, but I also I get irritated when people just rely on them and then start trashing on them when they don't 100% work out. It's like, well, you don't have the right, same guitar as the person, or for whatever reason. So like I try not to knock them, but at the same time, it's like, they're a good place to start. Let's see. Already reached out to support months ago. No fix across future updates. Modern Vintage, why don't you go ahead and email me at steven@neuraldsp, and I'll put your name in. Quattro Padre, that's just something that they're going to have to fix with the next update, because he asks, I have this bug sometimes when Nameless won't play, then I have to bypass it and make it active again, and it works. Yeah, so that'll be something. Ola preset. My bad. I'm not wearing my glasses, so Let's go. Artists, Ola England. They are different. They are different, just very, very subtly. So like the... if you go to Ola England's, it sounds real. You can see that the grind is at this like 2 or 3 o'clock position. I switch over to the next one and it changes. Let's see. And then there's an output difference I'm seeing as well between the two. So it's subtle, but it's there. Cool. All right. So, anybody have any additional questions? Because I can get into the drums real quick. Because I had, as I mentioned earlier, Wyatt Sharp asked me to kind of go through my drum kit. Quattro Padre, thank you so much. He says, you guys make an amazing job at your amp sims. Just want to throw it out. Thank you for your work. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I mean, I wish that I could take take credit. I just... you know, like the dudes at Neural do a fantastic job at really trying to make a really good experience and product for the customer, which I know that they hold that very high as far as like their ethics are concerned. They want to make sure that you guys have exactly what you need when you need it. So cool. Okay, cool. So Wyatt asked in the Facebook group if I could run down the drums. And so my drum kit is actually the J Moss signature kit. It's a pretty good sounding kit. I think it's actually pretty mix ready from the get-go. But basically I start off with that. Oh, no worries. Modern Vincent says, you know, he overlooked the pedals and the cabs. That happens, man. It's all good. Not a problem. So let's start with just our drums. Now, when I start with the drums, like I said, so this works for my workflow. I could part these out and do individual tracks for each, you know, kick head, kick body, snare top, snare bottom, rides. Like I could break all of these individual tracks you see on this mixer. So you have kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, etc. I could bounce each one of these out and mix it from there, but I'm kind of lazy. Again, I like to just try and get the job done in as little time as possible, which I think, you know, this set sounds really good from the get-go. So I'll actually I'll stop all of my processing so you can hear generally what this sounds like. Yeah, so it sounds pretty good. So immediately I'm going to start just doing some EQ moves. There were a couple of frequencies that I didn't like in the high end in some of the cymbals. And then I wanted to pull up a high pass filter, and then I wanted to put a dynamic band around 120 hertz or so, because I wanted to make room for the bass. Because one of the things when you come to EQing your mixes that a lot of people get wrong is that kick bass relationship, where the bass is going to live around 120, 150 hertz, give or take, and then the kick's going to be living around 50 hertz. So like you can see from this EQ curve while it's playing, the kick's fundamental is around 50 hertz. So the kick fundamental is around 50 hertz, where the snare fundamental is around here. So that's sitting squarely about 196 hertz. So the kick, the snare, and the bass all have to really kind of marry up to each other when you're doing a mix. So I usually take this little bit of frequency dip here. Now, I have this Sheps plugin here just to give it a little bit of saturation. I do another high pass filter, and I was messing around with the compressor in this one, but I didn't quite like the way that it was sounding, so I ended up going with this this other waves for kind of like ARTG mastering. And it sounds really great. Like, I love the compressor on this, and I did a little bit of like EQ polishing. So like I boosted like 16 kilohertz and 2.05. No, I left that alone. A little bit about 564. So like I did. I also use the spreader so that way I can make the stereo image a little bit wider. So basically all I'm using this for is like a little bit of compression and transient control, and then just kind of spice it up a little bit, make it a little bit wider in the mix. Then at the very end, I'll use the compressor just again to kind of hold down those transients so that way they don't poke out too much in the mix. And that's usually what I do. So and if I was doing an actual song, like if I was working on one of my own tracks, like I would part this out into the individual stems and then mix it individually. But, you know, for this, like this sounds really good, and I don't necessarily have to spend a whole lot of time like making all those micro moves to improve the sound, because it already sounds really awesome. So that and once again, that was the Room Sound J Moss Signature Series drums, and I think I played with like the levels and then turned off several. Yeah, I bypassed a couple of like the I bypassed some of the plugins in the plugin itself. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty much mix ready to go. Let's see. So Wyatt Sharp, there you go, buddy. So Modern Vintage asks, I don't have an issue with a grainy digital artifact present top end with neural plugins, but do with other plugins, Kemper, AxeFX 3. My engineers, producers all agree. Any reason why? Well, I don't know. To be honest, I actually have never. I think I've used a Kemper once, and that was at the NAMM show. I've never used an AxeFX 3. I think it's probably just that the Neural DSP guys have, one, emulated their products to a degree that they are as close to the real thing as possible. And I think, two, probably just that they're really good about doing their market research. And I think that they probably have seen people talk about that stuff enough to know to compensate for it within their own plugins. So I think that they I want to stress the amount of thought and care that goes behind these plugins that these guys are making, is that they are constantly trying to improve their products, and they're constantly trying to make their stuff better for the users, because it's great. Like I think that they make an amazing product, and you know, it's like I couldn't be happier working with the people that I'm working with, because like their work ethic lines up with mine, because I want to try and make sure that the product that I make is the best it possibly can be, and they feel the same way about their product. So like it kind of works on that level. Let's see. Any other questions? We got about 12 minutes left, and I can go over anything from the Parallax do plugins, or if you guys just want to chat or ask me random, ridiculous questions, I'm always a fan of that. Let's see. Modern Vintage says, agreed and buy a long shot. Yeah, I totally. You know, and it's great that you guys come out and, like, I love that you all are hanging out with me and asking questions. You know, this is, like I said, this is a lot of fun for me, and I really enjoy it. Let's see. All right. Looking for some more questions. Carol says, finally a company that gets it. I agree. I think that, you know, Neural does great work. And a lot of it has to do with their work ethic. A lot of it has to do with, like, their amount of innovation as well. Cause, like, they're doing some stuff behind the scenes right now that, like, I can't quite talk about it yet, but I think is going to, you know, blow your minds. I'm super dope. It's going to be super dope. So Rukshan Palinda asks, if I have more than one Mac, can I use my single license of Parallax on both computers? So you have, I think you get 3 activations. So you get 3 activations of the license, I believe. So you get, like, a number of them. Just go inside your iLock account and then drag the license. Is it 3 activations? 2, I think. You get multiple activations. Although an easy way to do that is cool, excellent. An easy way to do that is just put your license in a iLock, and that way you can move it back and forth between them. Yeah, and there you go. But there is a video that I can link in the chat that goes through activations. But yeah, so, you know, either put the single license on your iLock and move that between your Macs, or go into your Pace account and then just drag and drop the license to your new the other Mac. Let's see. Zach asks, are your guitars strictly L and R, left and right? Any center or offset guitar panning? That's a good question. So generally I leave my stuff, like, hard panned left and right. There are instances where, like, during quad tracking, you could take 2 of your guitars and move them further inward. You know, it's just a matter of whether you want your guitars to be present or more forward in the mix. But generally, I just leave them at left and right, you know, and then automate the volume up and down should I need any of that as well. So, like, I could mess around with that, and I hope to actually make a video on kind of testing out whether those variables make enough of a difference to really worry about them too much. But yeah, okay, cool. So that's generally it. What is your guitar? Bass guitar VST. Farshad Hassami asks, what is your bass guitar VST? I typically use the, I got this muted right now, but I'll use the Euro Bass 2. This thing is freaking killer. Let's see. And the bass signal chain. So yeah, so bass signal chain. I mean, it depends on which bass signal chain you're talking about, because I actually have all of these. So these are my bass tracks right here, going through, and I just have the Parallax, and then that goes straight to my mix bus. That is literally all I did. So, like, the Behemoth one. So yeah, so I literally just had Parallax on, and then took that to the mix bus. Now for, like, for the for the submission bass, I did use a little bit of like EQ to just to kind of like tighten up the signal that I was getting from it, because that like, yeah, I just wanted it to fit a little bit better. This is actually what I generally do when I'm making a song is I'll import this particular track, which I made probably like 4 or 5 sessions ago, just so I can bring in the instrument and a couple of settings and that just go. Let's see. Oops. All right, so let's take a look at the questions. Farshad says, I love the Nolly bass guitar tone. As do I. That dude makes some awesome sounds. Carol asks, what's in the works? Man, you've been at the last 2 Q&As. You know I can't talk about that. Let's see. Okay, so Modern Vintage asks, can you show how to use the Nameless personally? Seems like your tone is more versatile than most. Thanks again for answering all my questions. So yeah, absolutely. Let's see here. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to make this Fortin NTS inactive. I'm going to make this active. All right, so I'll just dial in these Lamb of God guitars real quick. So these are still... Why is this? Oh, that's not panned left anymore. Okay, great. Cool, so this is, let's start with the default. Default. Okay, cool. So that tone was I'm pretty happy with. Now, so Modern Vintage, what I did is I started with the hex drive. That's normally our starting point. Is that I like the grind again, but it tends to put a little bit too much high end for me personally. So I like the hex drive because it has this kind of high mid saturation that I really like. And then I moved to the head. I love pulling the MVC knob out and then boosting that up considerably, because you get this mid-range saturation again that I tend to really enjoy. And then it's just then dialing in like the gain settings so that it's not so fizzy that like the the top end starts to kind of break apart just a little bit, but you have that clarity of the notes still ringing through. And then I'll run through a couple of the different impulse responses just to find out and then fine tune their positioning so that I can get either a brighter or warmer sound. So that's kind of in a very roughshod manner. That's usually my starting point on how I dial in tones. Let's see. All right. Rukshan Palinda asks, what are your thoughts on single-tracked guitars and quad-tracked guitars? I'll extend this to dual-track guitars as well, so it kind of depends on the dynamics, the overall vision of your song, because there are bands like Decapitated. I went over this in a video I uploaded recently, where like Decapitated is a highly technical band, but his guitar playing is so tight that he can quad track everything and it still sounds really, really tight and really, really good. Whereas I am not as good a guitar player as him by a long shot. And, so if I wanted to quad track everything, I have to go through and painstakingly edit so many notes together. And it gets really frustrating. It's really time consuming. So a lot of the time, if I'm doing anything very, very technical, I'll do dual tracking, so that's just a left guitar and a right guitar, so that way I can remain clean and tight and I don't have to worry about it getting too spongy and weird. So but then if I get to like big chordal things, where I want this like really huge chorus section, or like there's big chords being rung out, like I'll do quad tracking for sure. And normally with the second set of guitars, I may do an additional voicing, so that way they're not just sitting right on top of each other. Because that's how you get that kind of wall of guitar sound, is that you have so many like you have notes kind of going up the spectrum, kind of filling all of the spaces. Leads, I generally only do single guitars for leads though. So cool. Zak Manzano, follow-up question. How do you approach guitar solos octaves? Still with a left and right method? Do you dual a guitar solo as well? That's a really good question. I think I just might have answered it, but I'll go into a little bit more detail with that. So generally single track my guitars if I have, and it's centered as well. So single track centered. If I have harmonies, if it's like a single harmony, I'll do it centered as well, but I'll bring the volume only up just enough so you can barely hear the harmonies, so it kind of accents the solo instead of taking it over. If I have multiple harmonies, I'll usually pan those out a little bit, so that way there's not so much clutter going on in the center of the mix. I don't double the same lines because I think that kind of invites too much room for error, because I've done it before in the past, and to my ear, it sounds sloppy, because even if you're a really tight player, like you can't get it 100% of the time every time, and you, with your leads, you want them to sound really clean, you want them to sound really tight, so I don't double the same lines, but I will harmonize, and if I do multiple harmonies, I will pan those out and kind of use my ear to get the right positioning. So maybe not full hard left and right for the harmonies, but maybe like 50 left, 50 right, 60s, et cetera, et cetera. But I would definitely use my ears and kind of try out different methodology for that. Let's see. Rukshan Palinda asks, can the Parallax plugin have the ability to switch tones like the Dark Glass plugin? Referencing the modern to vintage tone. That's a good question. So usually what I do when I want to kind of switch between that modern and vintage kind of tone is I will adjust the mid-range and the highs. So let's listen to this one real fast. So normally what I'll do is I'll just turn off, like if I want a more vintage kind of tone, I'll use the mid distortion. I'll boost this up and try and get that sort of modern tone out of that mid-rangey kind of sound. I'm getting a lot of highs. I think it's probably the bass that I was using as well was just very naturally bright. If I was using something like a P bass, it probably would work a little bit better. But I think that's. But let's just continue. So I would generally just turn off the high end and just try and bump up the mids a bunch. And then the opposite way. Yeah, actually, that sounds a little bit different the other way. Okay. But I would experiment a lot with the turning one band off or the other band on, because you can get some pretty cool tones when you use combinations of both, one or the other, and then both. Let's see. Zach says, "Don't ask him about Area 51." It's one of my favorite things in the world is that Area 51 is now a thing for some reason. I haven't watched the documentary on Netflix, but I love it. Let's see. Modern Vintage asks, how do you run pre-recorded tracks through different amps like that? Sorry, newbie with this. So yeah. I mean, if I'm guessing what you're asking, like I recorded my DI. Oops. Haha. Let's turn that off. So I just took my guitar, I fed it into my DI track, and then I went to my Scarlett interface, and then I recorded both tracks left and right, and then I just implemented those two, and I think that's what you're asking me. Different amps like that. Maybe if I didn't hit that right, maybe you could clarify in the comments further on. Let's see. Okay, so it's 2:06, but I'm just gonna keep going for a few minutes because I got looks like I got a bunch of questions and comments to get through. So, Carol says power sound with the nameless. Yeah, no, there's a reason why that became their kind of staple guitar plugin for a long time. Let's see. Okay, so David Lloyd asks, have y'all thought about a plugin for neo soul, math rock, and bedroom pop? Lush reverb, delay, big compression, chorus. I mean, he says, he continues on, I feel like the market for those are huge with the with this super user-friendly and appealing aesthetic of neural software. I feel like it'd be a huge success. I think that there's definitely some stuff coming up that I think you'll like in that realm. For the time being, as far as like if you're looking for something with big reverb, delay, and some good clean tones or math rock stuff, like the Archetype Plini amp sim covers so much of that. If you haven't tried it out, there's the 14-day trial period. Just try it out. It's amazing. Let's see here. Oh, looks like everybody else is already taking care of that. Okay. Modern Vintage, he says, Steve, sincerely thank you so much. You just saved me so much time and months of tinkering. It's my pleasure, man. Like that's why I'm here. You know, it's like I mentioned earlier in the stream, like I am so excited that I get to help you guys out, kind of culling that learning curve. Because I know for me, like I spent months and months and like years trying to get this stuff dialed in. And like, I think the Neural guys really do make it easy for us as a collective, as like guitar and bass players to use their stuff. Like, I think the user interfaces are always so kind and easy to navigate, but still there is like that kind of learning curve. And if there's anything that I can do to soften that curve, like, I'm more than happy to do so. Like, I really do think that being able to help everybody else up, you know, always raises the collective and the community, which is really my goal with working with you guys. You know, it's like, I want to raise the community up, and I want you guys to be able to make the best products that you can, because I know that it's possible with the software you're using. And, you know, the Neural DSP agrees, you know, with that, I think. And they, you know, it's like that's why they have me on here. It's like, they want to help you guys as much as I do, which is awesome. Let's see. Okay, so David Lloyd follows up with a previous comment. He has tried the archetype Plini, and while it's definitely headed in the direction of what I'm describing, but think it lacks a versatile amount of clean tones. Okay. He continues, also lacks chorus compression, and in his opinion, a good clean drive to add a small bit of grit without going metal mode. No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, like, the thing is, like, you know, that was built to Plini's specifications, and he's not a fully clean player, which, you know, that's totally understandable. You know, you're just gonna have to wait and see what we got coming out in the future. You know, we got some really cool stuff, and I think that archetype, I think that Neural is definitely going to broaden the horizon very soon. But I think, you know, it's just a matter of, like, they're going to keep coming out with products that they think are going to benefit the users. But definitely stay tuned. Like, we got some cool stuff coming out. Okay, so Modern Vintage says the nameless amp and plugin video you guys released was done perfectly. Seems to feel nearly the same under the hands as well. Any feedback on the plugin versus actual amp feel? I don't notice a difference, to be honest. Like, I mean, there's definitely something visceral about having like a 4x12 amp stack behind you, like, just like pumping and like moving your chest. But as far as like when I start to sit down and actually mix this stuff, like, I've never really noticed a difference. Like, I think I mentioned last week to Zach that like, I always play to an amp. Like, I rarely ever practice acoustically, because I did that for a very, very long time. I worked at a guitar shop, and there was a lot of downtime. So there was a lot of moments for me just to like sit and practice, but I never wanted to play through an amplifier, because it's like, it's an acoustic it was an acoustic guitar shop, and I played metal, so people didn't really appreciate what I was working on. So I would play acoustically and just kind of noodle behind the counter. And then I would get into the studio, and I would have to really change like the entirety of the way that my right hand played, because it was so vastly different acoustically than through an amp. But yeah, so there is like a little bit of difference between doing it, but like, as far as like the end product is concerned, there's very, very little difference in to my ears. Carol asks, can we expect comparison video between NTS and real amp like Neural did for the Nameless? I would like to see that. I don't know if, because they would end up having to borrow the head from Ola again. So you know, that's something that's going to be handled on their end for sure. What's up, Rodney? Rodney leaves a little heart for me. That's my buddy. How you doing, man? Let's see. Zak Manzano asks, any Steve Neural presets? Yes. If you go to any of the videos that I've uploaded, you'll see a link. You'll see a bit.ly link in the description. And those are to my presets that I've been making from the videos that I've uploaded so far. So, so yeah. So like, all of this stuff, That's all going to be in there. All of the bass presets, that's all in there. And I try and update it as much as I can. But if one takes me a couple of days, forgive me. It'll be it'll be up shortly. Let's see. Okay, so I'm only gonna go for like a couple more minutes. So ask me your questions, and otherwise we're gonna wrap it up pretty quick. David Lloyd asks, "What's the release schedule looking like? Anything else coming out this year?" Yes, a bunch actually. Yeah, so like the Neural guys are working hard to get the release schedule to release more products. And they're really it's actually quite impressive from somebody who doesn't engineer plugins. Like, it's impressive the rate that they're wanting to put this stuff out at. I'm super excited for what's coming out the rest of the year and even into early next year. Zak Manzano says, "Steve, you have this. You guys aren't ready for this smile. Whenever someone asks about future releases, it's getting me anxious. Ha ha ha." Yeah. I mean, I just got to say, I'm super stoked. I'm very, very stoked. I'm very, very excited to play around with the new stuff, and I'm very excited to hear what you guys think about it all as well. So, great. If that is all there is to it, I just want to thank you guys for coming out, hanging with me at the stream, asking so many really amazing questions. Like I said, I really, really enjoy being able to help you guys and being able to just hang out with y'all in this kind of digital space. So, as always, I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you guys for the next Q&A a week from now. See you later.